Welcome to How Did You Do It? Our space to get to know the people behind great ideas.
Whether you're on your morning walk, heading to work, or relaxing at home, enjoy. Your daily dose of inspiration awaits. Hello everyone and welcome back to How Did You Do It? I'm Georgia and as always I'm joined by my co-host Gabby.
Hello! We are so stoked about today's episode. I'm really excited for you guys to be joining us. Our guests today have had journeys that are really quite inspiring to us.
Yeah, this one is especially exciting. Today's guests turned their podcast side hustle into a full-time gig after 400 episodes, and they hold a well-established position in the Australian podcast space.
It's so cool to see what they've done. They've raised 6 figures, built a mini empire of finance podcasts, and are soon to be releasing their book, which actually is out at the time of listening. It's called Get Started Investing.
We're so keen to be joined by Alec and Bryce, the founders of Equity Mates. Hi guys, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having us. Very excited. Looking forward to it.
We're so excited to get into it. To start us off though, it would be great to know where the Equity Mates story began.
We had the pleasure of meeting down at university in Canberra way back in 2011. I think was the first year that I bumped into Alec at the cafeteria in our campus, and we ended up living together in a share house and had a lot of great fun together. And that's where Equity Mates really started. I'd been investing for a number of years leading into university and was pretty passionate about it and interested, and didn't really have too many people to kind of share that interest with. And Alec was, also starting to show a lot of interest in it as well. And so we started bouncing around ideas at home and recognized that there weren't a lot of good sort of content and resources available for beginners to understand, where to start, where to look, everything about brokers. And we were both into podcasts at the time, and there was nothing that really spoke to that beginner level with an Australian focus. And so that was really the start of Equity Mates and the idea of perhaps just doing a podcast that followed our own journey. And we were pretty selfish and said, hey, let's just do this and use it as an excuse to go and knock on the doors of fund managers and CEOs and pretend we have a massive podcast and ask them questions for our own benefit, with no intention of building it into a media business. I mean, I was studying commerce and Ren was in law and Asia Pacific studies or something along those lines. And I mean, here we are. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I'd love to really paint the picture for our audience of what Equity Mates looks like in the beginning. Was it just you guys at the kitchen table in your share house?
A kitchen table would have been an improvement on how we started. You can go back and listen to our very first episode from the start of 2017 and you'll hear terrible audio quality. There was one microphone sitting between the two of us, and for some reason, we decided to record outside. It must have been a nice day or something like that. So you can hear the birds in the background, cars driving past, as we're both, yelling into this one mic. But for us, we had no idea what we were doing. And I guess, with a lot of businesses, but especially with this one, you just have to be naive enough to think you know what you're doing and give it a crack. And for the first more than a year, I think we didn't get much better. Like the audio quality sucked, our content probably sucked, and not many people listened. But it's just that, continuous improvement, trying to learn, trying to speak to interesting guests and trying to work on your skills. And here we are, slightly better than when we were back there.
I even remember trying to make our website for the first time, and the changes that we've been through on that front, and figuring out how to even get a podcast out into the world, figuring out RSS feeds and Apple Podcasts and all of that. Like looking back, we were so naive, and we're just like, yeah, let's do it. And then we're just trying to bite off small chunks here and there, and have subsequently, got a little bit better at it.
In an interview you did with the AFR, you spoke about how the first 2 years of podcasting were a hard slog and that not many more people other than your mates and family were listening. So how did you go about expanding that following beyond your personal circles?
Honestly, I reckon it's generous to say our mates were even listening. I think they were pretty sick of listening to us talk normally, that they didn't want to, put their headphones in and listen to another hour of us. But it's true. And like the download numbers were tiny, but we didn't really care. Like, we just loved what we were doing, and we got to speak to some really interesting people. I remember maybe like 12 episodes in, we got to speak to Alan Kohler, who's the ABC finance reporter. And for us, that was like the biggest fish in the finance sea. And we were so excited to get to speak to him. And, we were buzzing for a week as we were preparing questions. And for us, that was the thing. There was no business plan. There was no broader strategy. It was just like, we loved what we were doing. And I think for any podcaster or anyone starting a business, like, to get through those early years where it's just a grind, like, you have to love what you're doing. And from there, it was just a matter of, consistently releasing content and seeing the numbers slowly edge up. The biggest growth hack that we found from those early days, and for you guys, any other podcasters listening, it's a good one, is use your guests, like, use their network, get them to share it, because really that's the only thing that helped us grow in the early days. And then the great thing about podcasts is there's a lot of word of mouth. If you're listening to a good podcast, you'll tell your mates about it. If it's really good, you'll tell random people about it at parties and stuff like that. And like, that's how podcasts spread. And so once you get a bit of a roll, you start to see that snowball effect happen. But yeah, early days, if it wasn't for the fact we were interviewing guests who had a following, we probably would only have our parents listening today.
And when was that moment when you first recognized that Equity Mates was going to be a bit more than a side hustle and you wanted to make it a full-time career?
It wasn't, it was quite a while into the journey. And I think I quit work in October, November 2020. So only 12 months ago. Ren was a little bit before that. He'd been trying to quit for a while, but that was sort of the tale of maybe 12 to 18 months of us consistently talking to each other about, we can actually see that podcasting is a business. Mind you, like, when we first started podcasting, if you were to tell our parents that we were trying to build a business being podcasters, they would have, and I think probably did, laugh us out of the room. Like, podcasting just wasn't a business back then, and no one was investing in it. There was no big money coming into it, particularly in Australia. Advertisers didn't even know what it was because they were all obsessed with radio. So, we slowly learnt as the years went on, and as our audience grew, and as we grew socials and we grew our EDM, that, hold on, people are willing to pay for this. And then we really started to recognize the power of audience. And that's, I think, where we really thought, hang on, what we're doing here is solving a need for people, which is making them feel confident about investing and getting into the markets. But we also now broadly know that building an audience has extreme power. How you monetize that, we'll figure that out later, but let's just try and build the biggest audience possible. And so then from there, we just kept plugging away. And the sort of lucky moment, I guess, for us was when, not more broadly lucky, but when COVID hit, the market crashed, the fastest crash in history. And everyone obviously was in lockdown at home. So we had two big tailwinds, obviously the huge amount of people listening to podcasts. And then we also saw a huge interest in the stock market when everyone's sitting at home, nothing to do. Let's try and put my government stimulus into the market. And so we just saw our numbers go crazy. And then we decided, well, how about we just sort of, and at that point we were pretty close to being able to say we're ready to quit. But this has now sort of really enabled us to say we've got a proper business here. We've got enough downloads to be able to monetize this properly, leverage what we've got. So we waited to see if that would hold, and we were fortunate enough that we did hold the audience. It didn't crash as fast as the market did. And then we just took the plunge.
Was taking that plunge a very daunting step?
It's probably more daunting for Bryce than me. I was pretty ready to quit my job. I loved what I was doing, but I was in Melbourne and I was trying to come back to Sydney. Bryce and I did the podcast long distance for a while, and long distance relationships never work. So we had to get back to the same city. And I'd gone through a few attempts at, quitting and moving back to Sydney, and I was at that stage working remotely for Coles, and I was ready to go. So it wasn't so much daunting as it was, a sort of sigh of relief that it's finally happened. But I guess it becomes real very quickly that like this is how you're going to pay your rent and, put food on the table. I think the moment it became really daunting for me was when we hired our first employee, and it's like, it used to be if we failed, we would just find another job. Now we're responsible for someone else's livelihood.
Yeah, I held on a lot longer, but I think that was a strategic decision. Like I wanted to make sure that, if we're both going to be doing this, then we both need to be able to live a life and not be stressed, because you don't want that sort of stress on top of the stress of just doing the job. We don't want to be at each other's throats about finances and that sort of stuff. So we held on to the point where we knew we had at least a runway for 12 or 18 months. In worst case scenario, we go back to our corporate jobs. We're also very fortunate enough through our networks that we built over a number of years to be able to get a very small sort of pre-seed round through one of our networks, high net worth individual. He gave us a little bit of money to get started and took a small position in the business. And he'd purely seen the journey of Equity Mates over a number of years and just backed us in. And that was that sort of little trigger to say, we've got a bit of a safety net. Let's just throw everything at the wall and see what happens. And worst case scenario, we're going back to Coles and Woolies. As much as Ren doesn't think he'll ever go back. But and we just had to back ourselves, I think. And we did. We said, we've got enough in front of us, and we kind of know enough about the industry that we can make something work here, and we'll figure out the rest as we go.
Yeah, I think the whole story of Equity Mates here is a story of sort of like foolish overconfidence and naivety. Like we started a podcast when there really wasn't a business model around podcasting. We quit our jobs when people thought we were crazy and, podcasting wasn't really seen as a business. But, when you're inside the business and you see the numbers and you can sort of see the unit economics start to play out and stuff like that, you sort of know before other people know. And so I think our friends and families were probably a lot more daunted than we were by the time we actually quit it.
And you guys made the decision once podcast was more established to diversify and really build a brand, creating a network of multiple finance and investing podcasts, writing a book that will be releasing pretty soon, and starting your mini empire in the podcasting space. How did you go about making Equity Mates bigger than just the podcast itself?
I think Bryce and I are very aware that we can't be, everything to everyone, that, we are two mates who want to learn about investing, but there's a whole world of investing out there that, people want to learn about, and, people want to hear from other voices and stuff like that. And for us, our second podcast after Equity Mates was Get Started Investing, as the name suggests, like the very back to basics. And that was because our audience was splitting, and some people had been investing for a few years and listening to us for a few years and wanted to hear, interviews with experts and stock analysis. And then there were others that were still at the, what the hell is this thing stage? And, what is an ETF? What broker do I sign up with? So that was when we first sort of realized that one podcast couldn't service, everyone's needs. And so we split it into two. But then from there, it's just been an extension of, the next show that we launched was a macroeconomics show, and, a former RBA economist and his stand-up comedian brother, breaking down the world of macroeconomics. Comedian the Economist, go check it out. But for us, Bryce and I, we're not economists. We don't know anything about the macroeconomic world. So again, it was just like, this is another set of topics, another voice, another perspective that makes sense. And, for all of our shows, that's sort of the approach that we take. There's so much to learn about in this world, and so it's fascinating. So it's, how do we make content to cover it?
Yeah, it's clear to see that you guys had, or started to really understand how to build Equity Mates beyond just your own podcast. but I'd be really interested in knowing, how did you go about selling the Equity Mates dream to investors?
A lot of decks and a lot of time spent. I mean, Alec and I spent a lot of time chatting about the business, but at the end of the day, at the type of sort of conversations we were having within the business and talking to investors, we were really trying to sell ourselves, and that's what the investors are looking for at that sort of pre-seed seed round. It was very hard to convince investors who are so used to investing in software platforms and big tech companies that have pretty clear revenue forecasts, and you can say that if we spend this much on marketing, we're going to get this many customers, and the cost per customer is this. That you can't do a lot of that stuff with podcasting. So convincing them that podcasting was an investable business was a challenge, but I think we managed to convince them that Alec and I at least knew enough about our business and enough about podcasting that they could invest in us and then, work with us to build this into a bigger business. So I love the process. I think it was something that we've both taken a lot from. The pitching process is very challenging. It's daunting, and every pitch is different. You might think that you need one deck, but you got to know who you're talking to, what they're going to be interested in from their point of view. Tailor your pitch accordingly, and then be open to feedback. I think Alec and I had so many times where we would go and speak to people as like a pseudo pitch where we didn't really expect an outcome. We just wanted for them to say, your business is shit, or like, this deck sucks. And then we can go away and make it better. And then, it took us, how long did we pitch for? Maybe in total, like a year of a bit of back and forth. It was a very slow process. We'd often go up to investors who we thought would be our target investor and just say, hey, can we get some advice from you? And just show them our deck with no mention of a pitch or wanting any money or anything like that. Just, hey, can we get some advice? And inevitably, they were the ones who would then put us in touch with investors or actually show interest in the business. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think we learned so much about the pitching process, but we also learned so much about our business. And it's one thing for you as an entrepreneur or as a founder of a business to be like, this is my business and this is how I want to present it. But to be really open to that feedback of how it looks to other people and how it comes across is really the important thing. And we changed our pitch so much, and different investors cared about different things. So it's a real iterative process. It was fun in hindsight. There were definitely times when it wasn't fun at the time. But I think it's definitely a good process to go through for any founder to really properly understand their business, is to try and sell it to someone else.
And would you say that's been the biggest challenge along the way, or what's been the biggest challenge for you guys?
There's heaps. I think one for me has always been trying to not want to do everything at once. We're often walking to the studio together or buzzing online together, and there's always new ideas. Every week there's a new idea going onto our to-do list. And for us, the challenge for a long time has been, what's the number one priority that we're just going to work on now? Because there's so many things and so many directions we could go, and we're super excited about the business and passionate about growing it. And you can't do everything at once. And so when the team is Alec and I, and has been that for many years, and we're fortunate to be in a position to be able to hire a couple of people now, but for so long, you just don't have the time, the energy to do everything. So you got to be really good at prioritizing.
Yeah, or the habit that we got into was trying to do everything and then doing a lot of things poorly.
Yeah.
So that's been a big learning experience. But I think, for me, I think the challenges would be different to Bryce, because we're quite different people. But I think therein is the strength of this partnership as well. Bryce is the most disciplined and organized, and he's the quintessential CEO that if he wasn't running this business, he'd be running Woolworths. And I am the opposite of that. I'm disorganized and lazy at times, or a lot of the time, and stuff like that. And I think we complement each other well. And I think, again, if there's any potential founders listening, finding someone with a complementary set of skills is, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Bryce.
I'd be here if I'd be here solo. No, I'm kidding. Back at Ren, very deep thinker, and he is incredibly good at the content side of things and understands that part of the business really well. And you need that obviously in a content business. So yeah, and that's really hard to do, is to find some. I think we were very, very, very lucky to just fall into this. I mean, so many people say don't go into business with mates, and we're best mates and happen to also have complementary skill sets, which I think if you were to try and find that, that's tough. Yeah, we're just very lucky.
I really do think that is one of the most important things, though, because it's so nice to have another person there that's like, you want to do good for them, you want to be a team and work together. I think that really helps you get through it. And also we can definitely relate. Georgia and I are absolute opposites. I think it's shocking to most people that we're even friends. To flip that last question, what have been the major successes so far?
It's a good question. I mean, it's pretty exciting to, be in the situation we are today, and, for you guys to want us to come on your show, and I guess to be able to do a lot of the things that we can do, live shows once lockdowns are over, or launch new podcasts and stuff like that. But it feels, I don't know if you feel the same way, Bryce, but it feels like it's still in that sort of early growth phase. I don't look back and I'm like, I don't think about a lot of major successes. I guess it's like, what's next?
I think we'll always feel like that, though.
I guess the book, we should take an opportunity to spruik the book. That's pretty exciting.
And I mean, the ability to actually take this full time has been quite an achievement, I would say. But yeah, I think that's one thing that we probably could be better at, is celebrating successes, because we're often just plowing through the week with so much stuff. Like, the book's out, it's kind of like, next, let's move on. And there's just so much stuff that is going on, and we should probably be better at celebrating success, because if you look back at where we've come from, I guess it's pretty significant. But there's a long way to go.
Where do you guys see the future of Equity Mates headed? Because it feels like you're kind of, all your foundations are getting laid. You're setting things in stone. What's kind of next for you guys?
I'm glad it looks that way on the outside. Certainly sometimes feels a bit different on the inside. Well, Ren, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So I think for us, we see that there's so much demand for easy to understand investing content. So many people out there want to understand how to get started investing. Properties out of reach in Australia, overseas, it's the same thing. Like, young people don't learn about this in school. A lot of people don't learn about it from their parents, and they want to get started. So I guess for us, what we want to do is just help people get started on their investing journey and be with them throughout it, helping, bring them interesting companies and resources. And, if we can do that, the forms that take will change. Right now it's very heavily podcasting. We've got a little bit of video and stuff like that. But I think, at its core, that's what we want to keep doing, just helping this generation do financially better than previous generations.
Definitely. We're so excited to see the journey ahead. It's been so great to have you guys on. Before we wrap up, though, it'd be great to know, what advice would you have for other people wanting to kind of make reality out of an idea?
Jeez. I think for me, like, a lot of people are searching for the idea and waiting for that idea to come along, and then think that once the idea arrives, they're just going to pick everything up and get going. I don't know about ran what he was doing during childhood and into university. But when we were at university, we were always talking about business ideas. We even tried to start a few. We tried selling soup at the library. Like we wanted to import like vintage clothes. I think my sort of learning is the more you surround yourself with people like that who want to talk about ideas and want to just jam off each other, but then also just trying to put things in place and just try and start small things, like if it's starting a small sunglass business or if it's making t-shirts or whatever it might be, you're going to learn things from each of those experiences that eventually when you do come across an idea, you're going to have a bit of a toolkit of skills and experience ready to go. So the more you can try and test and learn ideas. I mean, we even tried a betting app at one stage, Ren, or Specky, remember Specky?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we even went, this is going to sound a bit crazy, but we even went away for a weekend once with 4 of our mates with a big whiteboard and just talked about ideas around a campfire. Like, how nerdy is that?
No, I love that. That's the whole thing I love.
Like, all those small experiences add up to the point where you then then it helps you work through what is a good idea and what's not, because many ideas that we thought were good at the time didn't eventuate. So just keep trying, I guess, is my piece of advice.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really top that. But I think on the point of ideas, like ideas are cheap. Like ideas, everyone has a business idea, and a lot of them are pretty good. The execution is where it matters. And I think, Bryce and I's story is a story of starting terribly and just finding a way to do it cheaply and do it over again and do it better and better each time. And, this is a 4.5-year journey, and a lot of people are now just hearing about us, and so many business stories are like that. So I think, the beauty of the world we are in today is that trying ideas and refining them and getting better has never been easier, has never been cheaper. And so for Bryce and I, we didn't have to quit our jobs day one and do this full time. And if we had done that, it would have failed within a couple of months. But we could keep our jobs, we could try and execute, we could get better, and we could get to this point where we could quit our jobs 3 years into the business's journey. So I think if you've got an idea, find a way to test it, find a way to start it, do it cheaply, and do it as a side hustle. And, hopefully you can quit sooner than we were able to quit. But it's that everyone focuses on the idea, but it's how do you get better at the execution is how you get to this point, I guess. Yeah.
Definitely. I love each of your pieces of advice. Before we do wrap up, would you guys like to give a little plug for your book?
I had it in front of me.
I've got one. One second.
Well, we've taken all of the lessons and everything that we've sort of picked up over the last 5 years of the Equity Mates journey. We've spoken to over 150 experts, and we've taken it all and put it into a book called Get Started Investing. We're living in a time when it's never been easier to start investing in the stock market, and there is really no excuse. And this book is going to give you the confidence that you need to start your investing journey. So be it someone who's never even thought about it or someone who feels like they just want to upskill a little bit, there's going to be something in this book for you. So go get it. Get started investing.
Nice. Long plug there, Bryce.
As such legends in the space, that was obviously super inspiring for us, and we hope you guys enjoyed learning about their backstory as much as we did.
Yeah, Alec and Bryce were just so lovely and really down to earth, and it's great to see that, even after all their hard work and where they're at currently, they're still feeling like they're at the beginning and there's so much more to come. So I can't wait to see where they take Equity Mates and everything else that comes with that.
As always, we're going to do a bit of a social media plug. So if you aren't following already, definitely check us out on Instagram. It's at howdidyoudit_podcast. And for all updates on new episodes, go check out our LinkedIn page, How Did You Do It Podcast.
Be sure to check out the Get Started Investing book. It was plugged just before, so you know where to get it. And we'll see you guys next week.
Yay, we'll see you guys soon.